and welcome to CEO's Talk Sustainability. Today we have with us MD of Hindalco, Satish Pai, joining us to talk to us about Hindalco's sustainability journey and also give an outlook on how India Inc. is adopting to it and also how do we stand versus the global peers. Mr. Pai, always a pleasure to welcome you on the show. My first question, how do you see the overall sustainability thrust amongst India Inc. currently, and how are we really adopting it while taking care of our business strategies as well?
Yeah, I think the first thing, Nisha, is that for all corporates, and especially large corporates like Hindalco that work in mining and manufacturing, it would be fair to say that ESG has now taken an equal importance level compared to, let's say, financial results and all the other things that normally a corporation and a CEO used to get judged with. So I think ESG has become a critical part of a company's operations, a company's strategy, and certainly for the whole management and the CEO. These are things that we spend a lot of time and effort on. And I'm happy to say that Hindalco, being one of the largest aluminium players in the world, we have been ranked as the #1 aluminium company internationally by the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And even Frost & Sullivan has given us the top 2 ranking in the country from a sustainable business point of view. So very important topic and one that the management is extremely focused on.
Now, Hindalco is a large conglomerate with Novelis, Aleris. So how is Hindalco gearing up for this as an Indian company versus the global counterparts which are in more mature markets?
So I think that for Novelis and Aleris, these are downstream companies, and hence the focus on them really is from a carbon footprint point of view. And they are, because of their circular economy, recycling, very easy, and it's much more easier for them to do it compared to Indian companies. The problem for Indian companies in the whole ESG story, we are weak only in one point, and that's our energy source, because India is 90% coal-fired. And hence, from a carbon point of view, the Indian companies, that's the biggest thing they're working against. When it comes to all other aspects of the environment, actually companies like Hindalco are actually much ahead of the international companies.
Right. But how difficult is it for a manufacturing company like Hindalco to adopt to the climate consciousness in a very short period of time? What is the impact on the company? Tell us more about that, Mr.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most relevant question now, because for us, it's quite a lot of work. So let me tell you exactly what that means. So if we have to, we have made commitments to net carbon zero by 2050, zero waste to landfill. We have said that we will be water positive by 2030. So all these commitments require a huge amount of investment, technical innovation, and as well as hard work by our people to actually make this happen. So what that means is that besides taking these targets, we now have to have milestones in 2030, 2040, and 2050 to move towards it. So I think for companies like Hindalco, it's a combination of technical innovation combined with investment that we need to be doing on a sustained basis to meet these goals that we have set for ourselves.
That's right. I'm glad that you mentioned the cost that goes into being a sustainable company, and especially looking at the climate consciousness as well as reducing your carbon footprint as more investments than costs, Satish Pai. But definitely, it has an impact on the bottom line as well as the margins of the company in transition. Of course, all good in the long run as you move towards your sustainability goals. But in the interim, how do companies deal with that cost, increase that kicks in because of compliance to sustainability standards and ESG standards?
So it's true if you look at our capex spending now. We used to spend. I'll just give you some actual numbers for Hindalco India. we used to spend about 700 crores of capex for our aluminium and copper business. Now we spend about 300 to 400 crores on top of that every year on what I would call sustainability related capex. So whether that's putting FGDs to reduce the SOx, whether it's putting technology to reduce NOx, to get the ppm down, to get to zero water discharge, uh, to move and put solar plants and wind that we are doing, to put renewable power into the mix. All these require us now. We have a separate capex budget just focused on the sustainability, and I think that the good thing for us is today the aluminium and copper prices are at such levels that we are making the money that allows us to make these investments into the capex. And I guess that that's the way we are justifying this increased spend to do it.
Right. So there you go. You have differentiated on your own, Ms. Pai, that companies which are doing well, which have deep pockets, would be able to really, convert and adopt to ESG standards much faster because they have the capability. Because cost efficiency is also an important aspect that the companies need to look at. Now, let
Yes.
me ask you a question on how the global innovation is when it comes to climate consciousness. And India is known for low cost manufacturing. Is India going to lose that low cost manufacturing status because some of the European players who were not as cost competitive but may be more progressive in their innovative technology, which is compliant with carbon emission norms? Do you think that there is a overall shift in the marketplace, in the global marketplace, especially in the commodities market that you are part of, because of this new factor kicking in?
So the very interesting question. So let me try to tell you, when it comes to technology for water, when it comes for technology for waste management, when it comes to technology for biodiversity, forestation, I think that the Indian companies, and especially what we have done in Hindalco, actually are things that international companies are now coming to us to get to know how we do it and copy us. So if you look at, for example, bauxite waste, which is red mud, Hindalco, working with IIT Bombay and various other technology companies in India, has come up with how you can use red mud in road building, how you can use red mud mixed with fly ash for embankment building, how we can do mine backfilling. These type of innovations, the international companies have not been able to do. Whereas in India, we have been able to do it in a cost-effective manner. So I think that when it comes to technology with, let's take water positivity, let's take things like biodiversity that we are doing around our mines. This is where international companies are actually coming to India to learn from us how we are doing it. What you're right in is probably in the carbon emissions. Now, there is no new big technology breakthrough yet. Green hydrogen is still being worked on. The solar, if you look at it, India is actually quite ahead of many of the countries in adapting solar technology. So probably it's the energy equation where international companies are probably going to have a little bit of edge compared to India Inc. But I think when it comes to water, waste, air pollution, biodiversity, I think Indian companies are probably going to be ones that lead compared to the international peers.
So you made a very interesting point actually on the Indian innovation and R&D, and that could also get a thrust because of the climate consciousness and innovative technologies that need to be developed on that particular front. But let me ask you, at Hindalco, Novelis, and Leris, give us some example of the key areas which have been solved for the technological innovations in the past 1 year or so, where manufacturing companies like yourself find it difficult and you have come up with technologies which other companies can get inspired with.
So I think, for us, the best examples of technology I can give you are what are we doing in the whole electrification of transport. So Hindalco came up with the all aluminum bulker, the truck trailers that provide the transportation, the two-wheelers that are being electrified. We are providing a lot of the aluminum components. So a huge era of electrification of transport. For example, yesterday the railway secretary was giving the example of Hindalco aluminum wagons, because when you make aluminum wagons, you can carry more weight in the same wagons, up to 15% more. So these are some of the actual innovations that Hindalco has done to speed up the whole electrification target that the government has taken. So thought that I would just share some of these with you.
Right. So, what does the government need to do more? Like the carbon credit market needs to develop, more policy changes need to be done. We need to align those policies and reforms with the global standards and with other geographies where you are present in. What is required at this point when it comes to only climate consciousness part of ESG?
I think that the government needs to do two things. One, which they are already doing, which is providing as much regulatory support and subsidies to the whole electrification journey. Putting up the infrastructure so that batteries can get charged, transportation can go electric, because besides carbon, it will reduce the pollution levels vastly into the country. So that is one aspect which I think the government is focused on. The second aspect, which I think the government should do a lot more, they are starting to do it, is to encourage recycling. So this whole circular economy that people recycle, whether it's plastic, whether it's glass, whether it's metals, and it comes back. The more you can recycle, that will also have a huge impact on getting the carbon footprint down. So I think these are two broad areas where I think the government should put its focus on.
That's right. And when we talk about the other aspect of ESG, we spoke a lot about environment. Now, Mr. Pai, obviously there are two more subsets of it, which cannot be defined or quantified very easily. How is Hindalco moving towards the social angle as well as the governance angle for being ESG compliant?
So, again, a very good question, Nisha, I think, because people do get caught up in the E. The social S part, I think, is actually more important for India. And if you look at it for companies like Hindalco, we do mining in areas like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Western Orissa, UP. I think the social aspect is probably more important. The Aditya Birla Group and Hindalco, we have been doing a lot of work. But let me give you again a very specific proof point where we lead the world: sustainable mining. Hindalco, working with international bodies, came up with the Sustainable Mining Charter, so that you can then take a mine, mine it, and return it back to its original conditions when you give it back. I think the Sustainable Mining Charter is actually being adopted by the Indian government that we have come up with, and it's actually getting international traction. The second part of social, which we are spending a lot of time on, is livelihood generation. If you look at, a lot of companies do CSR, provide water, medical health, but we have been working on the whole livelihood generation in those backward areas where mining is. And for example, we have this Kosala project where we have revived ancient arts like Kosa silk, and we have got all the village ladies now generating extra income by creating Kosa silk saris, stoles, bags, etc. So livelihood generation is also a big part of our social endeavor that's going on. So Sustainable Mining Charter, I give you a specific world-leading example, as well as livelihood generation. So that it's not that they are dependent on companies' freebies for a long time, but they can actually stand on their feet through the livelihood generation initiatives that we have.
While we have spoken so much about the climate consciousness, and that is the aspect which can be more easily documented, what remains undocumented and probably cannot be also judged on many parameters is the social as well as the governance angle. So, how do you quantify the kind of social efforts being taken by Hindalco in the ESG compliance standards?
Absolutely, and I think that if you look at all the reporting that we do, I wanted to tell you, Hindalco is one of the few companies in India that actually does integrated reporting. So if you look at our annual report, it's the financial come sustainability report that's put together. And I'm happy to say that the Indian Chartered Accountant Association actually gave us the silver shield for our integrated reporting. Now, you talked about gender diversity. I think that, or diversity in its wholesome, is actually an important goal for Hindalco. So we have started to hire, and believe it or not, 40% of our engineers hired are female. We have been doing this now for the last 2 years. So I think that this whole diversity and gender diversity issue is also something that is very important to us. And we have started to do this right from the bottom. So we are not just hiring a few at the top level and claiming we have 10% senior managers. For me, the base of the manufacturing, and that's why 40% of our engineers hired are female. People have told me there's no way you can do it, but we are actually done it.
So that's very good to hear that there is some serious work being done on gender diversity aspect as well. But Mr. Pai, how difficult is it to take a bold call being the leader of such a large company to invest and take a hit on the margins and move towards the sustainability goals? In the boardroom chatter, what is the big decision that comes out and how difficult is it to push this particular agenda?
I think that Nisha, the board is and the chairman are incredibly supportive because I'll tell you one thing: ESG will be a license to operate condition going forward. So
Yes.
the boards generally have to take a longer view of the company's sustainability. And I think if companies are not sustainable, if their ESG metrics that they report or the work that they do, then banks will not lend you money, investors will not invest in you, and the general society and public in charge will not want to buy your goods and products. So I think for most companies today, it's a license to operate condition. And I think that you will be given a certain amount of time and period to get your act together. And I think that's why it's very important for companies to actually start doing the investment and actual things besides just taking big objectives as most companies have done. You really have to start actually implementing it.
That's right. You said it, and those are the golden words really coming out from you, Mr. Pai, that it will be a license to operate going forward and needs to be taken very, very seriously. With that, we come to the close of this discussion. Satish Pai, many thanks for sharing so many insights on your sustainability journey and the outlook for India Inc. on this one. And all the best for your sustainability journey for the company, Hindalco. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, it's a wrap on the show.
Thank you, Nisha.